Well, hello, folks. Jeff Salzman here, and welcome back to the Daily Evolver. It's Monday, January 22nd, 2018, and I'm happy to be with you. And I'm happy to be joined back with me, Corey DeVos from An Integral Life. Hey, Corey.
Hey, my man. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic.
You came back from, you guys had an Integral Life retreat in Vegas.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. Nice
How'd
little
it go?
2.5 day retreat. It was really nice. Lots of strategery, lots of hedonism.
You were in Vegas.
Yeah, we're bringing together the ascending and descending currents, people.
There you go. Well,
and I missed you, man. I've missed the show since last Monday, and it's awesome to be back here with you.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I agree. Good to be back. So so today we have to do one of our federally mandated shows on Trump, and it's a good as reason as any, because I think it was Saturday was the anniversary of his inauguration, and there's been a lot of postmortems for his first year, if you'll pardon the expression, and all the magazines have done their coverage and all the sort of the punditry and so forth. And I have to say that, just to cut to the chase, that I kind of agree with the consensus of what I hear out there, to the degree that I can put it together. And to just use sort of a basic integral frame, I think I would agree that Donald Trump has been in the exteriors, that is, in terms of actual actions and policies, fairly conventional in terms of what you would expect from a conservative who would to get into office. So we have the tax cuts, deregulation, conservative judges, hotter rules of engagement in war. There's a certain animal spirit that's released among the business people when that happens. And that's all been pretty much what you would expect and pretty much on schedule. The critique of Trump sort of centers on what he's doing in the interiors. That is, to use integral speak, the lower left quadrant of reality, the interior of the collective, which is our culture. What's he done to the culture and the discourse of our culture? And also what he's doing in the upper left, what he's doing to our minds, people, making us crazy. And, I have to say that at this point, I can't watch the Trump show. I certainly can't watch it all day. I used to watch news through the day pretty much all the time. And it's just, even like Morning Joe, which I have always held as, Joe Scarborough as being kind of an integral paragon. And I think he is in a way. But I also think he's running for president. I think he's going to challenge Trump. And I think he said something not long ago that he thought that there was, for the first time in his life, he thought there was a path for an independent. And he's cut his ties with the Republicans. And I think he's doing that, which I think is good politics. I would support him, but I think it's bad TV because he's really become just a base beater for, in the typical MSNBC mold, which is fine and great. And I basically agree with it in sort of the fundamental substance, but it's boring to hear it over and over. Anyway, even the consensus on Fox News, and I was watching a lot of the, Trump's first year shows on there, and they're all good with the exteriors, the stock market, the tax cuts, unemployment, median wages, ISIS is defeated, all of the conservative judges and so forth. But there was a consensus there too, that as one of the pundits said, and I can't remember which one it was, but he said, if he stopped tweeting, his numbers would go up 20%. And I think there might be some truth to that. That's certainly a critique, even on Fox and Friends, that you hear, that we wish he'd stop pissing people off unnecessarily and getting in his own way and so forth. So why is he doing that? And my thesis is that it's because in very important lines of development, in terms of Donald Trump's own self-sense, his moral line of development, his interpersonal line of development, that these are all located in a probability cloud. You know, they're fundamentally or largely located in red, which is an egocentric stage of development. And I've made this case for the last couple, since he came on the scene, and in past podcasts and so I won't necessarily go into all of it. But, you know, it is it's a unique place in American politics. And what you realize when you're dealing with red is that it's like I say, the one thing Donald Trump likes more than winning is fighting. He just likes to fight. And win or lose, that's the imperative at red. I mean, red is the power meme. Red is the part of us that comes online when we're in our terrible 2s and 3s, and it sort of expands again in our early teens when, you know, the world is all about us. And, you know, we careen from thing to thing. There's not a lot of delaying of gratification. There's not a lot of thinking things through. There's not a lot of planning. There's not a lot of impulse control. And that is, and some people get in important lines of development arrested there. And that is Trump. We also have that stage of development in history, which is the pre-traditional stage. And I'll get to a couple more ideas about that in a second, but I just want to lay out the integral map a little bit so that we can see how Trump is fitting into the political landscape. And my theme on the Daily Evolver has been that we are in, and I don't think it's particularly unique. I think my interpretation of it is, and Integral's interpretation of it is, but the idea that we're in an ever more polarizing culture is, you know, obvious in terms of how we feel about each other and, you know, how we sort of are organized around our where we live and just the partisanship and the gridlock and all of that stuff. And, you know, my argument is that polarization is a stage of development. It's like Walt Whitman said, out of the dimness, opposite equals advance. And what polarity's job is to define, is to differentiate one from the other so that we can basically expand the field of our world space. And then at some point there is a war or a fight. In this case, it's a culture war because we're modern enough that we realize that fighting doesn't work. And so we're in a culture war. And the next stage, if all goes according to plan, my plan, the next stage is a new integration, which takes the best of both of those, conservative and liberal, and integrates them into a new whole that is new in the cosmos. It's never been there before, and that it transcends both of the component parts and includes the best of them. And so, you know, that's sort of what we are working with. And typically, we have had our leaders have been on one side or the other of this. We talk about the traditional, which is nation-centric, but religious, socially conservative, and so forth. That's amber stage of development. We talk about the modern stage of development, which is secular. It's world-centric in the exteriors. That is, modern people get the world, they get travel, they get trade, they can have multinational companies and so forth. But they're not multicultural in the sense that they're that interested in the interiors of other cultures, of other people. And that's the job of the next stage, which is the green postmodern, which is world-centric in the interiors and the exteriors. And so at this stage of the game, these two poles are, you know, they hate each other. They demonize each other. They think that each is deluded and evil even. And they pull the moderns one way or the other. Moderns tend to organize around the business people tend to be on the conservative side of the street. The academics and technology people tend to be on the liberal side of the street. And, that's how we've been moving forward with, all of our leaders and candidates within those 40-yard lines, if you will. It's like Hillary Clinton, 1 foot in liberalism, 1 foot in modernism. Mitt Romney, the other way around, 1 foot in conservatism, 1 foot in modernism. And that's really true of virtually everybody. You can, if you think about the original Republican nominees, there's Jeb Bush and Kasich and Rubio and Fiorina, and then you have Rand Paul, and he was a little bit on the far end of the sort of libertarian small government side of the street. Ted Cruz, he was the socially conservative bomb thrower. Chris Christie, he was going to be the tough guy bully. There was all these characters set up, but they were still in the 40-yard lines. And then there's Trump. And Trump comes from, at least in these important lines, he comes from this stage of development that is prior to traditionalism. And it's what we call the egocentric. We say egocentric, ethnocentric, world-centric in the interiors, and ethnocentric in the exteriors. And then, traditionalists are both, postmodernists are both. But egocentric is basically just all about the person. I've often quoted the, when you think about these earlier stages of development in red culture, this was good. It was what you did. You looked after yourself, and you got with other people as it was appropriate for your safety. But bottom line is you're on your own. And I quote a Bedouin phrase. The Bedouins were the nomads that were in Saudi Arabia before oil was struck. And they were in a, sort of still on the power god kind of nomadic existence, very still merged with nature in important ways. And their slogan is, I, my brother, and my cousin against the stranger. I and my brother against my cousin. I against my brother. So at that stage, when you're at that level of development, if you're not out there slugging in one way or the other, or at least aligning with people who are going to slug for you, and gangs and clans and so forth, then you're not doing your job. Winning is great. Ideas and facts, they're fuzzy. We talk about living in a post-truth world. This is actually, developmentally speaking, a pre-truth world. This is the world that exists before a lot of facts. At that stage of development, you don't need a lot of facts. You need to know where the enemy is. You need to know where the buffalo are. You need to know if the creek's dry. You need to know things like that. And as you get into these higher, more complex red cultures, then, it's basically palace intrigue. It's loyalty and who's betraying who, and looking good, and Big Daddy, and you want to be more feared than respected. And that is Donald Trump. If you read Fire and Fury, this new book about the backstage at the White House, and I do think it's comfort food for liberals, actually. I think you could spin that story a number of ways, and this guy spun it for maximum effect. But as most people who know the situation said, it's true enough that, you'd think you were in the court of Louis XV. I mean, it's just everybody's behind the curtains, but that's that stage of development, because we haven't gotten modern enough yet where we have a constitution or a set of rules or laws or checks and balances. Before checks and balances, it was Big Daddy, basically. It could be a woman, but it still was this person whose word was law. And you just kind of can make it up as you go along. And this is, this in some ways, I liked, whose column was it in the New York Times? Frank Bruni. He talked about how Trump is the most honest president we've ever had. I mean, in a certain way. He also tells 5 lies a day, according to the New York Times, very well documented. And he's just a classic bullshitter, which is you just say what you need to say in this moment to get to the next, and who cares what you said? And you're a shark. You're living in real time, and you're swimming in real time. And that's Trump. And there's something that is bracing about his lack of any shame about it. It's or guilt, and it has its own power. It's one of the things that I've realized about Trump and about Trumpism and redness is that it's more powerful than I gave it credit for in our modern world. And, just the sort of chaotic nature of evolution with its ebbs and flows and little eddies and black swans, that you can get a blast of red emerge that, you think came out of left field. That's certainly what the other 16 out of 17 Republican nominees thought. And, I do think that there's a possibility that it works with other people who are red. I think Trump could have, I'm not all that worried about him insulting other leaders in North Korea and so forth. I don't think they're going to attack back because of an insult. You don't want to insult the holy warrior's God, but these guys live in palaces. I've always made that distinction that, you worry about the ones who live in the caves, not the ones who live in a palace. They don't want to die either. And this mutually assured destruction, I think, is so there may be something that is actually fruitful there. I think it remains to be seen. But, in sort of placing Donald Trump in some integral categories, red is, I think, where we go first. Another thing that we talked about, and I just want to illuminate a little more, is that Trump may also have certain personality disorders in addition to just plain old vanilla red. I read an article, I mentioned it a couple months ago, in Atlantic Magazine about people who are working with kids who have callous and lack of empathy disorder. And it's, it's on a spectrum of disorders that where the extremes are they really enjoy cruelty and really enjoy causing pain, and they really do enjoy that. And, the lesser extreme versions of it just have people who don't notice when they're hurting other people. They don't care. They don't have the antenna for, the empathy that is online for most of us, almost all of us. I mean, we may all know people who don't have it, but now we all know somebody who doesn't. And this is Trump. And he's just sort of a classic example of a person with this disorder. And I read something that I thought was interesting, and I thought I'd share it with you, that those of you who have had, philosophy courses or courses in ethics or so forth, or have read about this sort of thing, may know the classic thought experiment called the trolley problem. And this is a thought experiment in ethics. And here's how it goes. There's a runaway trolley train barreling down the railway tracks. I'll start over. There's a runaway trolley barreling down the railway tracks. Ahead on the tracks, there are 5 people tied up and unable to move. The trolley is headed straight for them. You are standing some distance off in the train yard next to a lever. If you pull this lever, the trolley will switch to a different set of tracks. However, you notice that there's one person tied up on the side track. So you have 2 options. You can do nothing and the trolley's on its way to killing the 5 people and it's going to kill them. Or you can pull the lever and have the trolley go off to the side track where it will only kill 1 person. So what do you do? And the answer, there's different answers actually, but the answer that most people agree with is that you pull the lever and you 4 people get to live who wouldn't have got to live before. And the ball was already in motion and you did the best you could. Now there's a variation on the trolley problem. And here's how the variation goes. It says, as before, the trolley is hurtling down the track towards 5 people. You, this time now, you're on a bridge under which the train will pass. And you could stop it by putting something very heavy in front of the train. Now, as it happens, there's a very fat man standing next to you on the bridge. And your only way to stop the trolley is to push him over the bridge and onto the track, killing him, 1 person, to save 5. Should you push him over? And the answer, again, you could have different answers, but the answer is that you don't push him over, because that's an active act and the ball was rolling, and you just can't grab this guy out of nowhere and throw him onto the train tracks. Except for people with callous and lack of empathy disorder, they throw the fat guy over. And there's a really interesting, I'll see if I can find it and post it, but there's a really interesting YouTube where they talked about this study that they did with people with this problem, often attended by a small amygdala in the brain, which is the sort of fear center. And, these people just don't respond in the same way to other human beings. And they are also children of God. And one of the things I loved about this article in The Atlantic is they talked about some of the treatments that they have for these kids that are working. And the bottom line of the treatments is punishments don't work. Rewards do. And boy, that tells you a lot about Trump too. It really helped me to see how he's always going after the rewards, which in his case are ratings, attention basically. And that's, think of children and teenagers, they want attention. That's that look at me, who you looking at kind of thing that is always going on with Red that makes everybody crazy. And that is, it's often attended by lots of bling, babes, and you look at his house, his Mar-a-Lago, his palaces that he's built himself, the interior of his airplane, for God's sake. I think Air Force One is a lot more understated. But that's what you got. And so, Trump doesn't mind the government shutdown. It actually is exciting to him because he's in the arena. He doesn't lack self-awareness about this. There was an interview I heard, actually it's been publicized quite a bit in these last days, where he's criticizing Obama for letting the government shut down and how the president's in charge and it should be the president who gets the blame and so forth. And he's talking about that with the government shutdown, that it's, what was I going to say?
Is it the one where he was saying that the responsibilities basically goes right to the top?
Yes. It's a responsibility of the president. But he also says you got to get in there as a negotiator, and you have to be nice, and then you have to get angry, and then you have to go wild. And that's what he does. And that's what, basically Big Daddy does. He just keeps everybody off base and off center. And every eye has to stay on him. So as long as people are talking about him, and the currency for Trump is attention and looking good, then, he doesn't, the other stuff doesn't, it's not only that he doesn't care, it doesn't register. It's not as important to him as it is to the rest of us. So, that's what we got here. And, there's been times when I was like, I was for Hillary, and, I had a first woman president party on November 7th where we were all going to celebrate her election. But there was always a part of me who was like, boy, I'd love to run this. Talk about a thought experiment. I'd love to run this thought experiment where Trump gets elected. We actually see what happens when, we have a guy like Trump in charge. And, be careful what you wish for. But, it's like the experiment has escaped the laboratory. And so here we are in the middle of it. And, there was never, the hope I held out was that he would be, able to embrace this broad actual agreement. We agree on DACA. What is it? 80% of people want to deal with DACA and not throw them out. And there's a lot of basic agreements on infrastructures and so forth that we could do. But he so far is just running this hard conservative line and playing to his base. And I don't know what his strategy is. He clearly gets it, but he's not going to win re-election if that's what he wants, and maybe he doesn't. But he's not going to do it with a 35 to 40 to 42% approval rating. Of course, I said he wasn't going to win the first time. So this guy is, sort of something new here. And like I said, I had hope. I think it could actually change in 2000. We have this election coming up, the midterms in 2018. It looks like the Democrats will win the House at least, if not both the House and Senate. And then he could be the great unifier after that. I don't know. If he wants to be a winner, that's what he'll do. If he wants to be a fighter, he probably won't. And he'll go down in defeat. So a year out, we don't know for sure right now. But I will say that in terms of the conservative policies, I'm a liberal. I don't necessarily want bigger government, but I want more people taken care of. I want there to be, more opportunities for people. I want multiculturalism. I get the piece of the truth that nationalists and even ethnocentric people have about preserving culture as, things change. I get all of that. And so I'm not as upset as a lot of my liberal friends are about the substance of Donald Trump's first year. Conservatives they are here. They are part of the system. There's, 33% of them are hardcore, and they get to win sometimes. And I do think that one of the big lessons of this election was that those people aren't going to be left behind as we modernists and postmodernists march forward into a global culture, that they're not going to go easily. And so we have to take them into account. And I don't have, big, as I said, I don't have as big a worries about this as a lot of my liberal friends do. And I do want to just end here with a comment from Breitbart. Breitbart's comment section is very interesting. And I've been reading it for a long time. And it's interesting to see how it's changed. Breitbart is Steve Bannon's site, and it's, very much the nationalist, anti-immigrant website and so forth. And what I've noticed is that the Breitbart comment section has become a lot more thoughtful since Trump has been elected. There's still a lot of flamethrowers and bomb throwers in there, but it used to be kind of all that. When it was Obama was president and they were in the opposition, they really knew how to do opposition, and it was, ugly. But now they're trying to sort their way through this MAGA, this Make America Great agenda. And I saw a couple of comments that I copied, and I'll read them because I think they help us to see how our, nationalistic, ethnocentric, religious, brethren and sistern, think. So here's one. He writes, I'll tell you the truth. I don't give a shit about Afghanistan. I pray they'll find their way, but that's between them and God. I don't even want their oil. We have plenty of oil here. Here's another one. Electric cars, green, all of that stuff, fine. But let's do it our way. Let's do it the American way. The rest of the world wants to get together in Paris, fine, let them. What we want to do is keep focus on the MAGA agenda, make America great again. Stock market soaring, unemployment down, overseas employers returning to the US, consumer confidence at an all-time high, burdensome regulations slashed, ISIS defeated, conservative judges. That should be the focus. So these people are activated by Trump. They may be amber, and most of them are. And you know, again, probability cards, they got a lot of red in them. They got some modernism. They got postmodern in them. But they are, they're galvanized by this guy who is such a beautiful enemy of their enemy, which is this globalist, multicultural thing that they think is leading us into oblivion. So they get to be here. And I think for me, the big lesson of Trump's first year is we all got to fight. You know, there's red in all of us. And we all got to get in the game in a way that feels right and moves the ball. And we can fight like hell and be ruthless and fierce. But what we don't get to do if we're a serious integral practitioner, or at least what we work on, is we don't get to hate them. So there you go. Got that all sorted out, Corey. What do you think?
While you were sorting all that out, I think I solved the trolley riddle.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, here's, and my hope is that America is also solving the trolley riddle. And cool. I think that solution is, if you've got a guy who's fat enough that he can stop a train, and you're strong enough to be able to push him off of a ledge, that means that you're strong enough to stop the train.
Yeah, but you're at a bridge. You can't. It's too late.
Well, you gotta hop down there. You gotta run.
You could throw yourself over.
Get on the train and stop it yourself.
You could throw yourself over.
There you go.
Huh.
I think that's the selfless and wise decision.
I do too.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
yeah.
And when it comes to Trump, you know, it reminds me as you're talking, Jeff, when Steve Jobs died, you did an episode and I did a fairly large piece of writing that was really looking at, you know, what we call his reality distortion field.
Yeah.
And I think that Trump also has a reality distortion field, but it works very differently than Steve Jobs did, right? Steve Jobs had this like sort of personal gravity that was so strong, it would bend light, right? I mean, it would actually change your perception sort of if you're in his field. Trump, you know, I call him Hurricane Donald. And I think that's sort of the nature of his distortion field where, you know, he's got this calm sort of center and that's where his base lives. And that's, you know, really where 25% of our country lives, is sort of in the eye of that storm. And surrounding it is just these, you know, gales and these winds and, you know, things are getting uprooted and flying around. And, you know, we as sort of the public, you know, we see sort of the dignity and decorum and these institutions getting uprooted and flying around. And as soon as we point to one flying by, you know, before we can sort of hit a tipping point of appropriate outrage, we get hit in the back of the head with a flying cow, you know, which sort of contributes to what John Oliver called Trump's, you know, it's the bed of nails problem. To any other politician, anyone, you know, getting paid, you know, getting caught paying off a porn star, that is one nail that is going to cut right through and, you know, your career's toast after that. But with Trump, it's just nail after nail after nail after nail to the point where he can, you know, lay down comfortably on this bed of nails and nothing ever penetrates.
Yeah, it teaches us something about culture, doesn't it?
That's right. That's right. And usually, you know, most hurricanes lose their energy, lose their force when they hit, you know, when they hit landfall. And, you know, metaphorically, that would be sort of like, you know, when it hits sort of mainstream journalism, all that, you know, the winds start dying out and it starts losing all of its energy. But this, you know, Hurricane Donald is pretty good at sort of steering itself and, you know, staying on the shore so it never really hits landfall.
Yeah. No,
And as a
it's
result,
really such an interesting,
they stay safe.
yeah, it's an interesting lesson in development in a way, in these worldviews. It's like Trump's numbers are basically what they were when he was inaugurated.
Yeah.
You know, very few, how many modernists or postmodernists have been convinced by Trump to support him?
Yep.
You know, it's just, you know, I mean, we don't have antenna for it. It's just naturally repulsive. And yet for people who want some of the things he's espousing, and particularly seeing him fight liberals the way he does, that's mother's milk to them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not about being convinced. It's not about facts. It's about, you know, what we just naturally, who we are and how we see the world and what we vibe with.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Well, and I appreciated too your differentiation that, you know, the people who support Trump and who support his views, and we might, you know, accurately label them as largely amber views. I mean, it's very, you know, us versus them. It's very binary set of views. Yes. But that doesn't necessarily mean that all of these people are coming from amber values. It's just that, you know, they're again, it's a probability cloud, and their values go up and down, individual to individual, and, you know, within the individual, day by day and context by context.
Absolutely.
You know, it all depends on who they're talking to, who they're surrounded by at any given moment. But the point is that the views give them sort of a, you know, a valiance. It gives them, you know, something they can really, you know, get behind and line up behind. Mm-hmm. And in a certain way cuts through a lot of the noise and a lot of the friction that's created by these conflicting values.
Yeah.
You know, you're sort of able to self-organize into a larger us against, you know, even more sort of insidious them. And, you know, it makes it a lot easier for people with disparate values to get on the same page underneath the banner of this very ethnocentric us versus them view.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're in the arena.
Yep. Right on schedule.
Yeah. Right on schedule, I guess. I mean, we'll see how, you know, I don't know how it's going to end. It never ends, of course, but what's next? The thing I see the most hope in is that how the younger generation just doesn't want to have these arguments anymore. And that's interesting to me.
Yeah, it is, Jeff, I agree.
At least not in the same way.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think when we're rating sort of the Trump era, you know, you sort of need two columns, right? You need to sort of like, what's my judgment of Trump himself, and then what's my judgment of, you know, sort of the rest of this country and how they're responding.
Yeah.
In that sense, you know, I give Trump a D-, and I give sort of our collective immune system a B+.
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, more to come, and we'll get this straightened out yet.
Yep.
Thanks, Corey. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.